Hello everybody and welcome back to more political chatter. In this video we will be talking about polling averages and how they compare to the 2020 election. And we will be using this information to make an accurately filled in map, 2024 election map, based off of these polls. So what I mean by that is, for example, in the state of Wisconsin in 2020, just as an example, this is 2024 now, but back in 2020, these are all the 2020 polls. Every single one showed Joe Biden up by a lot, by 10 points, by 12 points, by 8 points, by 10 points, by 13 points over Donald Trump. But on election day, Joe Biden won by just 0.63%. It was closer than anyone expected. And that same situation goes for many, many states around the country. So looking at how states are looking like they are going to vote in November, according to polls now in this 2024 election, we will be using, on average, how off the 2020 polls were. For example, the 2020 polls in Wisconsin overestimated Biden by 7.8%. So we will be using that 7.8%, we will be now adding that difference from in 2020 to these 2024 polls, if that makes sense. So now in 2024 in Wisconsin, Donald Trump appears on average it really does appear to be an even election. When you consider all of the polls, we have quite a few even polls. We have some where Donald Trump leads by 1 and then by 2, and then we have some where Biden leads by 1, 2, and even 3. So on average, this is just about even. So considering that Wisconsin overestimated Joe Biden by 7.8% in 2020, then that means if it's average now, if polls are showing it is or even right now, not average, if it's even right now, then that would mean that Donald Trump, according to these polls, would win the state of Wisconsin by 7.8%. If that makes sense, I hope it does, which is a likely margin victory. It falls in between the 5 to 15%. Now that might seem insane, and that is never going to happen, and I'll mind you that this is just a prediction. Polls are always off in American elections. These 2024 polls do just seem to be overestimating Donald Trump a lot of the time. In most states, it appears that they are, as of now. So of course Donald Trump won't be winning Wisconsin by 8 points, but it is still very interesting to see how this would play out if you use how wrong polls were back in 2020 in 2024. So we have Wisconsin. We will be doing the rest of the states, and we will be seeing where that difference points towards a Trump victory, where it points towards a Biden victory, and who wins the entire election. So we did Wisconsin. Trump wins by 7.8, one of the most critical battleground states, but we will be going in alphabetical order. So starting with the state of Alabama in 2024, polls on average, Donald Trump, let's say, leads by 22%. But back in 2020, he led on average by 19.5, and he won the state by 25. So polls underestimated him by 6 points. So, of course, we can expect to see him win by a solid margin if this time around they are all showing that he will win by a solid margin again. And I'm just doing this slow right now just to make it make sense for all of you guys. Again, we are seeing by how much polling overestimated Joe Biden in 2020, or how much it overestimated Donald Trump by each state in 2020. We are applying that difference to the polling in the 2024 election. Now moving on to the state of Alaska in 2024, we have a few polls. On average, he leads by about 9 percentage points, just 9, but back in 2020, he led by 7 percentage points, but he ended up winning by 10. So, 7 plus Trump overestimated polls in Alaska by 3% in 2020. So in 2024, if it's now showing him winning by 7, then he will win it by 10, which is a likely margin victory. Now moving on to Arizona, one of the most critical battleground states. Arizona. Polling back in 2020 showed that Biden was up by 2.6 on election day. He ended up winning by just 0.3%, just 0.3. So that is a 2.3% overperformance. Now looking at 2024, we have Donald Trump leading by 6, by 5, by 4, by 3. So obviously, despite whatever the average is, it looks like the average is about 5% Donald Trump leads by. So of course, Arizona, hypothetically, if we're talking technically with the system that we're using here to characterize these states, this would be a likely margin victory. Really, really shocking. Just shows you the state of the race right now. So in Arkansas, this is the state of Arkansas now. On average, Donald Trump appears to lead by about 28 or 29 percentage points. I mean, a lot of these we don't need to go through, right? I mean, Arkansas is going to be solid Republican. I don't have to go through this whole process. In California, California may very well be likely, though, when we look at these numbers. So looking, just to take a guess, on average, it looks like on average, Biden leads this is 2024. It looks like, wow, he only led by 12 in this poll. So it looks like the average he leads by is only about 17 percentage points. And in 2020, he led by 29. The state voted for him by 29, so this would be a solid margin win. So polling was exactly accurate in 2020. So that means that we can trust, by this process that I'm using here, we can trust that the average of 17 or 16, whatever I said, percentage points, Joe Biden will win the state by. So California, that means, would be a solid state. And by the way, when it comes to characterization of states, till is less than 1%. Lean is 1 to 5% margins. Likely is 5 to 15% margins. And safe or solid is above 15% margins. Just in case you were wondering, but I'm sure many of you all know that. So, Colorado, this is 2024. Biden appears to lead by about 9% on average. 9%, but back in 2020, he led on average by 12.5%, and he won the state by 13.5%. So this is one of the instances where it was in overperformance by Joe Biden when you look at polling. So he overperformed by a point. He won by 13.5%. So this would be a likely margin state. In Connecticut, in 2020, Joe Biden led by 26% in polls on election day. He only won the state by 20. So that is a 6% overperformance. Now looking at 2024, Joe Biden on average leads by about 12. So that would by far, in a way, be a lean state a likely state for Joe Biden. That should be a major concern, considering how Democratic Connecticut is. In 2020, Joe Biden led in the state of Delaware by 24% on election day. He only won the state by 19, so that's a 5-point underperformance. And we don't have any polls in 2024, so I guess we are just going to call it safe. Safe. We're just going to apply the same polling to 2020, but it's not like we need to watch out for a state like Delaware anyway. In the District of Columbia, I bet we only had a couple polls here, but Biden led by 85, of course. This will not be one that changes at all. Florida now, a somewhat close battleground state, but this is a really interesting one because back in 2020, Joe Biden on election day led by 2.5% in polls. But Donald Trump actually won the state by 3.4%. It was a really astonishing win. So Trump overperformed these polls by 6%. By 6%, he overperformed polls. And in 2024, the polling is now looking great for him. He leads on average by about 10 or 11%. It looks like on average, though, that it is 10%. But still, 15% makes it if he overperforms by 6%. This would be a safe state, and now that is really incredible. But when you do this process, he would win it by over 15%. So now that we have the feel of this whole process, I'm going to start filling in states that we don't really need to talk about all that much. That, when you include this process, they are not going to get away from safe at all. If there are even polls conducted in these states, which many of them there aren't. That's states like Wyoming for Donald Trump, or Idaho, or North Dakota, or South Dakota for Trump, or Nebraska's 3rd District, we probably don't have any congressional district polls, or the 1st District, or Oklahoma, or Louisiana, or Mississippi, or Tennessee, or Kentucky, or West Virginia, or Missouri. These are, or probably not Missouri, because that one could get close. These are the states that we don't need to worry about. Utah, we don't even need to consider any of these states. As for Joe Biden, states like Vermont, we don't need to talk about. Maryland, we certainly don't need to talk about. And Hawaii, of course. But unfortunately for him, really, that's it. We should consider the rest of these states. So that fills in a good portion of the map, but we still have many, many states that we should still talk about, and Nebraska at large. So now moving on. Georgia, one of probably the most critical battleground state considering how many electoral votes it has. This is 2024. Donald Trump leads every single poll by 6, by 7, by 1. On average, it looks like it's about a 5-point lead in polling for Donald Trump in the state of Georgia, which is extremely good for the Trump campaign. Those are the numbers that he should want to see. In 2020, Joe Biden led on Election Day in polls by 1.2%. He only won the state by 0.2, so they overperformed him by a point. So Georgia would actually be a likely state. Now, that is really incredible. That is a flip from 2020. You see Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia. That's already 3 very solid flips for Donald Trump. That is what he needs to do in 2024 to win the election, is flip these states. In Hawaii, not one that we need to talk about, of course. Idaho, we don't need to talk about. In Illinois, which in 2020, Biden led in polls by 16%, by 16. But he actually won the state by 17%, another rare occurrence where polls underestimated him. So he overperformed polls by a single percentage point. So looking at 2024 now, he appears, on average, to lead by, I'd say, right at about 14%, or probably about 13%. So this would be a likely state for Joe Biden. Indiana, in the 2 Trump versus Biden polls, he leads on average by 20. That's an easy average to do. Now in 2020, Trump led by 10 on Election Day, and he won it by 16. So this is going to be a solid state because he overperformed 2020 polls by 6%. Now looking at Iowa, state that used to be competitive. Now this one's really crazy, just to show you how bad polling is in some states. Trump led on Election Day by 1.3%. You can see that Biden was actually up in the weeks leading up to Election Day, in the months leading up to Election Day. But Donald Trump actually won by 1.3%. He led in polls by 1.3% on Election Day, but you can see that he actually won it by 8.2. That is a 7-point overperformance by Trump. And that really goes to show how well he does in very rural areas. He overperformed by 7% in those states. And this polling in 2024 is a lot more friendly to him. You can see that he leads by 15, by 9, by 12, on average by about 12 or 13%. So, of course, this one will actually become a safe state in 2024, according to the process. In Kansas in 2024, Donald Trump leads on average by about 14 or 15%. Back in 2020, he led by 12% on average, and he won the state by 14, a 2-point overperformance. So this one would narrowly be a safe state. In Kentucky, not one we need to talk about, or Louisiana, but in Maine, you can see that in 2020, Biden led the state by 13%, and he only ended up winning it by 9, which is a 4% overperformance for Joe Biden. Really interesting to see in a state like Maine. But now in 2024, and this is for Maine at large, by the way. So he underperformed by 4%. But you can see that in this poll, in the statewide election, remember they give their electoral votes out by the at-large vote and by congressional district. But looking at the at-large vote, Donald Trump leads by 6. Now, if this one really does become competitive, I don't know the accuracy of this poll, but this could be a real shocker in November. But that would make it, Maine at large, a likely state for Donald Trump. And using that 4% overperformance by Donald Trump from the 2020 polling, you can see that in the 2nd congressional district, Donald Trump leads by 20% this time around, so that'd be a safe district for Trump. And Biden leads the 1st district by only 8%. So if he underperforms by 4%, as he did in 2020, this would actually become a lean district for Joe Biden, our first lean state or district yet. Remember, that is a 1 to 5% margin. Now looking at Massachusetts, sorry, I forgot to characterize this one. We don't really need to talk about Massachusetts. That's going to be safe either way. And then another one of the most important battleground states in the country, Michigan, we can see Donald Trump leads in polling by 3, by 2, by 6, by about 4% on average. And when you look at 2020, Biden led these polls by a lot. He led by 8%, and he only ended up winning by 2.8. So that's about a 5% margin. So Donald Trump now leads by 4. So he would win the state by 9, hypothetically, according to this process that we're doing using the 2020, the difference between the polling indications and the actual general election results. That would mean that Donald Trump wins Michigan by a likely margin, which would be a huge win for him. In Minnesota, Biden led by 9.2 on average. Biden now he won the state by 7.1. That is a 2% underperformance. So now looking at 2024, you can see that Biden on average leads by about 5%, we'll say. So that would make it a 3-point win for Biden, only a 3-point win, a very narrow win, which makes it a lean characterization. In Missouri, Donald Trump in 2024, we can see on average he leads by about 15%. And back in 2020, you can see that he only led in polls by 8%. Just 8, and he won the state by 15. This is one of the huge differences in polling versus the actual results. So that is more than a 7-point overperformance. So in 2024, that one is definitely going to be a solid state for Donald Trump. In Montana, in 2020, Donald Trump, this one, people were actually wondering if Montana could be competitive because he only led in polls by 4.4%. But he ended up winning by 16.4, a massive 12-point overperformance by Donald Trump in this very rural state. So looking at 2024, he leads by a solid margin regardless in every poll besides one. So yes, this will be a solid state using this process. In Nebraska, we don't really, well, I guess we could do this. On average, he leads by 17%. And in 2020, Biden led, I guess, by 3.8%. And I don't know how that's possible because Trump won by 19. Probably because there were only a couple polls conducted. So that is a 16% overperformance. Yes, that is a 16% overperformance. Now, this might have just been the 2nd congressional district. It probably was. So I'm just going to fill this in lean because I don't know what else to do. And yeah. So now moving on to the state of Nevada, a critical 6 electoral votes in Nevada. Biden led by 5.3% on election day in 2020, and he won it by 2.4, which is about a 3% underperformance by Joe Biden, yet another underperformance according to polls. And you can just see how polls always overestimate the Democrat, especially Biden back in 2020. So Trump led by this is now, and he leads by about 4 or 5% on average. So this would become a likely state, and that is another flip for Donald Trump. In New Hampshire, sure to be a close state in 2024. Just looking at the Trump versus Biden polls, it looks like on average Biden leads by about 6 percentage points. 6 percentage points. Now, back in 2020, he led by 11, and he won the state by 7, which is 4% underperformance by Biden. So that, what did I say the average was for this? So the average I said was about 5. So this would make it a 1-point race, which is just a lean margin, just over a 1-point race. So that signifies that New Hampshire may be very close in 2024. In New Jersey, we only have 2 polls for 2024, but Biden only leads by about 5.5% on average, which, that's very interesting, this one. New Jersey could be a real sleeper race in 2024. And you can see that Biden led by 20% in polls, but he only won it by 16, 20.9 to 20.4. So that is a 4% underperformance by Joe Biden. A more than a 4% overperformance. So looking at 2024, he only leads by 5.5. So that would actually make New Jersey, known as a safe Democratic state, a less than 1% margin. Now that would be very interesting to see. Very interesting. In New Mexico now, Biden leads by, just looking at the Trump versus Biden polls, he leads by about 9% on average, really not bad. In 2020, though, he did lead by 11, and he only won by 10. So, point overperformance, so that's still a likely state for Biden. In New York, this is one that it's looking like Donald Trump will actually target in 2024. Biden led by 29% in 2020 on election day, 29.4, and he won by 23, so that is a 6% overperformance. So looking at 2024, he led by 6. Now on average, it looks like he leads by about 10. So New York would actually become a lean state, which is could be a sleeper race also potentially. We'll see on that. In North Carolina, this is 2024. Donald Trump leads by about 4% on average, it looks like. Now, in 2020, Biden led here by 1.8, and Trump won it by 1.3. So about a 3% overperformance. So when applying that to 2020, we could expect North Carolina to be likely for Donald Trump. In Ohio, a state where Donald Trump only led in polling on election day by 0.8%, just 0.8, but he won it by 8. So that's a 7-point overperformance by Donald Trump, yet another overperformance by Trump, 7%. And when you look at these 2024 polls, he leads by near a solid margin in every one. So this is definitely going to be a safe state when you apply this process. In Oklahoma, not one we need to talk about, but in Oregon in 2024, on average, Biden leads by 12% or 13%. In 2020, he led in polling by 21%, and he only won it by 16, so that is a 7-point overperformance. Now, what did I say? So this is about, let's call it a 12-point lead right now, a 12.5 lead for Biden, and then that is just over 5% to make this a likely state for Biden, but that could very well be a lean margin state with another poll thrown in. And then Pennsylvania, the battleground state with the most electoral votes. Now this one is very split in polling. On average, it looks like, Trump was up by 2, Biden was up by 2, Biden was up by 10, Biden was up by 3. So it looks like on average, I'd say, with this 10-point lead for Biden here, but with more polls favoring Trump, saying that Trump will win, I'd say that this looks just about even. So what matters is the difference in the 2020 results versus the actual polling. So Biden led by 5 in polling in 2020, but he only won it by 1. So that is a 4-point overperformance for Joe Biden, which means that Trump wins the state by 4%, a lean margin win for Trump in the critical state of Pennsylvania. In Rhode Island in 2020, Biden led by 30. He won the state by only 20, so that is a big 10-point overperformance by Donald Trump, underperformance by Joe Biden. And now polls on average say that he's going to win by 14%. So that means that Biden would only carry the state of North Carolina by a lean margin, by just 4%, if polls overestimated him by 10 back in 2020. In South Carolina, I'll try to finish this up quickly here. We can see on average, Trump leads by about 16%, we'll say. It looks like about 16%. Now back in 2020, he only led by 7.1 in polling, but he won it by 11, so that's a 4-point overperformance. So this one will be a safe state for Biden. Now, in Texas, we can see that in 2020, this one was expected to be really, really close. Donald Trump only led by 1.1%, but he won the state by 5.6, so that's a 5.5% overperformance by Donald Trump. 5.5%. Now he leads by 12, by 12, by 9. We'll call it a 10-point lead on average. So Texas, for the first time since 2012, is actually a safe state for the Republicans. Safe. Now with the last two states, we have the state of Virginia, which in 2024, we can see Biden leads by about 4%, we'll say, which is not a healthy margin for Virginia for Biden, or in Virginia for Biden. 4-point underperformance in 2020. He leads by 4 in 2024. And then he led by 12 in polls and he won it by 10, so 2-point overperformance. So this would mean that Biden only wins the state of Virginia by 2%, by a lean margin. And finally, finishing up with the state of Washington. In 2020, Biden led these polls by 23%, but he won the state by 19. So that's a big 14% overperformance. Now in 2024, Biden leads on average, it looks like, by about 14%. 11, 16, we have 2 points here, or 3 points here. Yeah, so this would be even. I can't call this race, and good way to end. This ends off as a toss-up state. We'll call it tilt, just for the sake of the fun of this process. So when you include how wrong polls were and how they overestimated Biden, or in a couple cases Trump, in 2020, and you apply those overperformances and underperformances to 2024, we see that Donald Trump wins huge, by a huge margin, flipping Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Washington. New Jersey is tilt, Rhode Island is lean, New York is lean. I mean, a really shocking result, but Donald Trump wins by a lot, with 327 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 211. Again, this is not a prediction. I know this will get posted on Twitter, like, what is this kid's prediction? But it is not a prediction, I will mind you that. So thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you'd like. That helps out a lot. It doesn't cost you anything. You can just help me out with that. Leave a comment, leave a like, and I hope to see you all next time.